1, 2, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. Hey there, y'all. What's up, baseball fans? We are back with another episode of True North Sports Talk podcast for your viewing pleasure. We are talking about a change in Major League Baseball. And this is one of the first major changes to the game itself in 100 years. Now, pitch clocks and automatic balls and strikes as consequences and pitch comms. You might say there's been a lot of change recently, but nothing that I would say is this drastic. So, welcome to the show, True North Sports Talk Podcast. Today we are diving deep into one of the biggest rule changes in baseball history. Now, you might have guessed what it is if you are a baseball fan. If not, this system has been a long time coming. In the 2026 Major League Baseball season, it starts at the end of March. For the first time ever, baseball is well over 100 years old, so the first time ever, players can challenge balls and strikes without consequence to a degree. That's right. We are talking about what has lovingly become known as the ABS. They've been testing this for the past few seasons in the minor leagues, but it is the automated balls strikes system. It is coming to every major league park on opening day. It'll be also coming to Oakland's park in Sacramento. But this is not a drill the way it was in spring training last year. This isn't a test. This is happening for real. So those manager freakouts, those Lou Pinellas kicking dust on the plate or grabbing the base and going home, or all those managerial meltdowns will be much fewer and far between, because the players themselves, because coaches are not allowed to challenge this, but the players themselves, along with the umpires, can police balls and strikes in a way that, in theory, should be far more satisfactory, even to the viewers at home. Robot umpires, as some would call. Well, sort of. So today we are breaking down everything you need to know. We're going to explain exactly what the ABS system is, how it works. We'll get into how it might change the outcome of games, how it will affect strategy. We're going to talk about what we learned from last year's spring training, as well as from what we're seeing so far this year in spring training. And we'll close at the end, so stick around. We'll talk about what this means in a way for the future of baseball. So this is going to be very detailed. So buckle up, grab your coffee. I got my tea. Forgive me, I feel like I'm about to cough. And let's talk the future of America's favorite pastime. Although favorite may have been a bit of a thing of the past, but it is still up there. So what is the ABS challenge system? Well, let's start with the basics. Let's get a foundation, because without that, we won't be able to fully understand it. So what is the automated balls and strikes system? Well, the system is more or less a middle ground between two extremes. On one side, you still have traditional umpires calling the balls and strikes, where a human umpire calls every ball and every strike with no technological assistance. While that is going on simultaneously, you have the ABS system also calling balls and strikes alongside the human umpire. However, the ABS system will only be brought into play upon request, even though it is tracking every pitch, whether it's a strike, whether it's a ball. Major League umpires are going to have to be on their toes because the data that Major League Baseball is going to have to tell whether umpires are good or not is going to be at their fingertips just by watching the ABS data. So, if it's challenged, it will be called in. So you have a two-pronged system. You have humans and you have technology. So Major League Baseball tested both systems in the minor leagues over the past few years. After listening to fans, players, and team personnel, it was decided, and I believe rightfully so, that the challenge system was the best option. So here's how it works. We've already gone into it a little bit. The umpire still makes a decision. Is it a ball or is it a strike? So, just like it always is, nothing changes there. So, you still have that element of humanity involved in our favorite sport. The difference is now, players can challenge, and in a sense, this almost is a way to keep umpire ego in check. You have to believe past umpires like a Doug Eddings, well, he's even still an umpire, or like an Angel Hernandez or a Jim West, would not survive long under this system, knowing how bad their games could be. And there's many others. Like there are a few other umpires, I can't remember their names. If I saw them though, I'd be like, that guy's in trouble. So players can now challenge if they do it the right way without fear of repercussion from the umpire getting upset. So the only people who can challenge is the batter, the pitcher, or the catcher. So if they believe that the umpire got the call wrong, they can challenge it. So you're going to see this from those three players a lot going forward in baseball. On those three positions, but only those three positions are able to challenge. So managers, coaches, other players on the field, none of them can challenge. Now, some would even argue that only hitters and catchers should be able to challenge, because I saw one example at the very minimum of a pitcher challenging a call and the catcher's going, "What are you doing? It's a ball." Because obviously the catcher's in a place where he knows the umpire made the right decision. So, the challenge signal, we already showed it to you. The player taps their helmet or their cap, depending on whether you're a pitcher, a catcher, or a hitter. That's it. There's no arguing, there's no delay, just a tap. So that is the call to phone a friend. The technology takes over at that point. Once a challenge is issued, the ABS system, which uses a 12 Hawkeye camera system, that is positioned around every Major League Baseball park. It analyzes the pitch location relative to the batter's personalized strike zone. So this is the thing, is that the plate is 17 inches across. Oops, sorry if that was loud, y'all. That kind of hit my ears pretty good. So 17 inches across for the plate, and then you measure, there's a certain distance between where the knees are and just under the letters. And so there's a specific distance based on the height of each player where the strike zone is determined to be. So those height measurements that are taken of every player now become extremely important, and you have to believe that there are advantages even more so now for a Jose Altuve as opposed to in the past when Randy Johnson batted, Aaron Judge, taller players of that ilk. So each strike zone depends on criteria of the player's dimensions. Now, obviously, the 17 inches across does not change for anybody because that's the size of the plate. The result is displayed within 15 seconds. It's an animated graphic. We've all seen it so far. It shows up on the video board in the stadium so everyone can see it, as well as the TV broadcast so the viewers at home are able to see it. Now, I saw a video, and I'm going to explain in a minute, that was very interesting already in spring training. But the graphic shows whether the pitch was a ball or a strike according to the technology, and it even gives you measurements for how much it missed by. The call is then either confirmed or it's overturned. If the technology agrees with the umpire, obviously the call stands. If it does not agree, then the call is overturned. Simple as that. The game moves forward. And with that technology involved, it's pretty hard to argue from all standpoints. Now, what I saw was very interesting. I saw between the Boston Red Sox and the Pittsburgh Pirates a game where an umpire called 2 balls, both were challenged by the catcher, and deemed strikes. And then he called 2 strikes that even my untrained eye, watching at home before they ever challenged it, told me they were balls. The opposite being with the balls that were turned over for strikes, but he called 2 balls strikes. Again, instantly, challenge, call overturned. And this is a minor league umpire who's umpired under this system that was making these calls, and they were exactly opposite, and it was clearly opposite to what the calls should have been. So already in spring training, we've seen some real interesting things as we did last year. Now these challenges, though, have limits. Each team gets 2 challenges per game. That doesn't sound like much, does it? It sounds like you have to covet those things and really protect them. However, there is a caveat. If the umpire's call gets overturned, so if you are successful, it's like the base path challenges that coaches have. So if the umpire's call gets overturned, either from ball to strike or strike to ball, you get to keep your challenge. But if you are wrong and the call stands, then you lose one of your 2 challenges. So this isn't just a willy-nilly challenge everything. You had better be pretty darn sure, like 95 to 99% sure. Because once you've lost both challenges, you are done for the rest of the game. And that could affect the outcome, and where you might still see the odd manager umpire argument, and you can't challenge any more pitches for the rest of the game. However, that is important. And this next point is very important as well. If the game goes past 9 innings and you have no challenges left, Major League Baseball gives you one challenge for each extra inning. So you'll never be completely out of challenges in extras. So who can challenge? Well, we've covered this a little bit. Only the batter, pitcher, and catcher. That's it. Managers cannot challenge from the dugout. Coaches can't challenge. Other players cannot challenge. And here's the kicker. Players cannot get help from the dugout when deciding whether to challenge. No signals from coaches, no analytics guys yelling from the tunnel. The player has to make the decision on the spot right after the pitch, because once it gets to that 8 seconds and he's got to be back in the batter's box, if he's not, we know the pitch clock rules that will govern that. So if you're not back in the box by those 8 seconds because you are determining whether to challenge or not, you could be assessed a strike. If you're a pitcher and you run out the clock trying to figure it out, you'll be assessed a ball, right? So what is this technology? Well, it runs on Hawkeye technology. This is pre-existing technology that runs the StatCast system that you see on almost every broadcast in the majors this year. There's 12 cameras positioned around every ballpark. They track every pitch in real time. The data is transmitted over a very private 5G network. It's run by T-Mobile, and the animated graphic is generated and displayed almost instantaneously. In spring training last year, MLB tracked 88,534 pitches. Only 4 pitches were not tracked. And out of a total 1,214 challenges, the animation only failed to display on the scoreboard just 5 times. That's a 99.99% success rate on tracking and a 99.6% success rate on displaying results. So overwhelmingly, you would have to admit this technology works. So, I already explained a little bit, but we're going to do a segment here on how the strike zone itself is determined. So this is where things get interesting. Major League Baseball defines the ABS strike zone as a 2-dimensional rectangle set in the middle of home plate. Here's the specifics, as we mentioned a little bit, but we're going to get more detailed on each person where the height and all that stuff comes in. So as we mentioned, the middle of home plate is 17 inches. So that's the width. Because obviously if the ball crosses the plate anywhere, even on the black, it is still a strike. The top of the zone is 53.5% of the batter's height. So from the ground, 53%, so just over halfway. The bottom of the zone from the ground is 27% of the batter's height. So that is how it determines whether the ball crossed the plate in the zone or not. And again, player height matters in this system. Again, a guy 6'7" is going to have a bigger, and I'm talking Aaron Judge here, a bigger zone than, I think Jose Altuve is 5'6" or something like that. He's going to have a much smaller area than Aaron Judge. The depth of this front to back of the plate, the center is 8.5 inches from the front and back of the plate. So that is where it's measuring the ball to cross the plate. So if any part of the ball touches any part of the strike zone, so even if it's by one of those red thread laces that touches just a hair of the corner, it's a strike. So it doesn't, you got to be real certain. We are going to find out real quick who the best eyes in baseball are to know whether strikes are strikes and balls are balls. So every player's height is measured individually during spring training. It's done by independent testers, so it's not Major League Baseball. They use a standardized process, and players are measured standing straight up with no cleats on. And I actually got that right. I didn't realize I'd written it down, so that must be how I remembered. This ensures that tall players like Aaron Judge, who is 6'7", have a larger strike zone than shorter players like Jose Altuve, who is 5'6". The zone is customized to each batter. And that also would mitigate things that Rickey Henderson would do as the best example. That crouch he had, he was short to begin with. He was like Jose Altuve, maybe even shorter. But then he would bend his body to compress his strike zone. That isn't going to work now on the ABS system. It might work with the umpire, but not the ABS system, because it's based on your height, not how you stand at the plate. So that mitigates a bit of advantage that the hitters might have. Major League Baseball will certify each player's official height before they can appear in a regular season game. So how does that system, and I've heard it described as there are 4 actual strike zones at work here. So how does the ABS strike zone compare to the umpire zone? Well, this is a very crucial thing. The ABS strike zone is actually smaller than the zone umpires have traditionally called. According to Major League Baseball research, the umpire's called zone has been more rounded and more lenient towards pitchers. The umpire zone top is at about 55.6% of the batter's height. So that's about 2% more than the ABS. The bottom zone was always at around 24.2%, which is about 3% different than the ABS. So in a 2-2 count specifically, the umpire called zone was 449 square inches. The ABS zone is much smaller. So what does this mean? Well, pitchers are going to have to adjust. That high strike that umpires would give, that have been generous for years, if the batter's sharp, that may not be a strike anymore. That low strike just below the knees, that may have been called in years past, that might disappear also, which has led to pitchers like Max Scherzer, among many others, and I'm only singling out Max because I've heard his comments being with the Blue Jays last year and this year. But he's not real thrilled about this because someone with his reputation And the pitches that he's had called for him over the years, before he was a Blue Jay, and even then some after, I mean, it's gonna make and hopefully help hitters be much more selective about the pitches they swing at. This should benefit hitting a lot more than it has in years past, as they will get more pitches called balls, especially around the edges, if they have the eye to catch it. There is somewhat of a controversy or issue here, and that is the 2D strike zone versus the three-dimensional strike zone. So the rule book for Major League Baseball defines the strike zone as a three-dimensional space. A pitch is a strike if it crosses any part of that 3D solid at any point over the plate. The ABS system measures the pitch at one specific point. So when the ball is at the midpoint of the plate, so that's 8.5 inches from the front and the back. Here's the thing. People need to have patience. Over time, we all know technology like this. It grows, it expands, it becomes better over time. You have to think that the more this is used, the more they learn the ins and outs of it, the more the technology increases, they will be able to 3D the ABS strike zone. So be patient. This is year one. There are going to be kinks to work out. And I mean, I know they've been doing it in the minors for years, but it's a totally different thing down there as opposed to a major league park. So as fans, we have to be careful not to overreact if we feel like the 3D versus 2D is an issue, or maybe a pitcher shouldn't be having the ability to challenge, whatever the case may be. We've only had 2 spring trainings for this. Let's get through a season and see how it goes. They may even tweak it a little bit during the season if they find that there is an egregious thing that needs to be tweaked. But that means a pitch that crosses the front of the plate at the knees can rise by the time it reaches the midpoint and might be called a ball if it rises enough. So technically it may have crossed the zone. So there are lots of purists, and I mentioned you'll have guys, probably David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, these guys in the studio, and many a commentator that never played with this system. Max Scherzer, maybe a Verlander, some of these older type players that are really going to hate this. Major League Baseball says, though, it's the most practical way to implement the system. But again, the technology is going to grow. It's going to expand. It's going to get better as technology does. They just need to use it and figure out how to best employ this. And so this is where we're at. So for now, we need to have patience with this system. I, for one, am excited to see if this can really, especially guys in the Blue Jays. I mean, some of the games I've seen called against us, and I'm sure fans in every city feel this way. But some of the games I've seen called against us and proven afterwards were just downright atrocious. So if the players, like a Vladdy, if you call that ball inches off the plate on him, and he can challenge you without repercussion and win those back, it means he doesn't have to expand his zone anymore. Because I've seen him go through some very frustrating times where he's swinging at balls that, sitting at home, we're all like, what are you doing? But the way the umpire's calling the game, you understand how he's swinging. So this gives players the ability not to expand, especially on strike three, where they can let more pitches go, and if they have to challenge the outcome, they challenge the outcome. So, we're already into it. Let's see how and talk about how this system's going to change baseball, because it will change the game in very significant ways. High leverage moments will be far more accurate. But as the Blue Jays and all of baseball fans saw in the World Series last year, even replay gets it wrong sometimes. Sila. The entire point of this system is to correct the missed calls in these high leverage moments, like inning number 11 of the World Series in Game 7. And the data shows that players are using these challenges strategically already. So in AAA last season, more than 8% of pitches on a 3-2 count were challenged. Compare that to less than 1% in an 0-0 count. So they are waiting on it to make sure, because if they can save an out, that's what they want to do. So in a 0-0 count, if you get a strike called on you, it's like, okay, I got 2 more, plus however many foul balls I hit. But players are saving their challenges strategically in the back of their mind for the biggest moments of the game. Full counts, runners in scoring position, later on in the game when the game is on the line. And as fans, and as Major League Baseball, that's what we all want to see. Now, as Blue Jays fans, we have one of the best catchers in the game at framing pitches. That whole with the glove, or like this with the glove, that we've been seeing because every catcher does it, that's going to work a lot less now. So this has been huge. At one point, one of the best in the game at it was a former Blue Jay in Russell Martin, Pudge Rodriguez, Jorge Posada, Pat Borders. You think about these guys going back. So catchers are going to lose some of their framing ability. That's huge. If you were a catcher and you could make a ball look like a strike and get the umpire to call it, you had a job for life. And it was all about the way you caught the ball, how soft your hands were, how little you could move it, but move it enough that it was just an art form. And yes, catchers should probably still do that, because if they don't, and the batter doesn't challenge, then they could lose out on some strikes. So that advantage is all but gone, but not completely. The ABS system does not care how the catcher frames the pitches. It only cares if it touches the described box that we talked about earlier. So it is more objective than any umpire could ever be, based on umpiring is a human thing, and humans are not in any way, shape, or form without prejudice. So catchers like JT Realmuto, Will Smith, Adley Rutschman, Alejandro Kirk, these are elite framers in the game, and they might lose some value in contract negotiations because they're not able to point to that metric as a way to say, you need to pay me more. On the other side of that, catchers, and Kirky has gotten a lot better at this one, but catchers who are great at blocking, throwing, and game calling won't be hurt as much. And all three of those are actually strengths of Alejandro Kirk as well. So, will those other catchers that we mentioned, Realmuto, Smith, Rutschman, can think of a few others, Danny Jansen's still in the game. One sec. I'll try not to make this loud. Sorry about that. Just been dealing with a bit of a dry throat the last few days. So some of these catchers, Cal Raleigh, Sal Perez, some of these really good catchers are going to have to be good at other things in order to get that paycheck more than just framing the ball. So pitchers are going to have to adjust also. Because remember, the ABS strike zone is smaller than the umpire zone, which is why there's about 4 different zones in this game, especially from top to bottom. Pitchers who live on the edges, think of like a Greg Maddux, even a Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander in more recent years, guys going back like Doc Holliday. Pitchers who lived on the edges, guys who throw a lot of borderline pitches and just hoping the umpire gives them the call, they're going to struggle a lot more. The umpire might still give them a call, but if the batter challenges, they're going to have to they will lose their pitches. So pitchers are going to have to be a lot more accurate. On the other hand, pitchers who attack the middle of the zone and rely on the movement of the ball to fall away to the edges, they're going to be okay. Now, if you've ever watched a broadcast, I don't care what team you're cheering for, I know myself as a commentator, I always say is that if you have, or if you are a good pitcher, you should be aiming to throw the ball down the middle every single time and let the running movement do the rest. Whether it's a curveball, a slider, a slurve, a changeup, whatever it is, you should start it in the middle of the plate so it looks like a strike and let the movement take the ball off the plane of the hitter's bat. That's what good pitchers do. And so that's what we're going to be seeing more of, you would hope. What else we're going to probably see is less ejections for balls and strikes. Now, there's still going to be guys who are at umpires and you'll get the odd ejection, but one of the biggest selling points is that there will, and this was the same when you brought in challenges, is there will be a lot less of either players or coaches being thrown out of the game. So this should hopefully reduce arguments and ejections. So if a player challenges and loses, they can see it right in front of them. So there's not really an argument to be made there after you see it in that kind of black and white. So if the technology showed and proved the umpire was right, where's your argument? It kind of went out the window, didn't it? So if you're choosing to still argue after the ABS, and if I see that as a manager, there's going to be conversations that need to be had internally with that player to be like, yo, what are you doing? You were proved wrong and you're arguing? Come on, we need you in the game, right? Like there's going to be all kind of those conversations should that happen. But hopefully, and the aim of all this is to reduce that number. So that said, Major League Baseball Vice President and on-field strategy or of on-field strategy, Joe Martinez, he admitted that players and managers have still objected to calls even after ABS reviews. But doing so, you're still going to get thrown out of the game. In general, though, the hope is that ABS reduces the number of blown calls that lead to heated arguments and ejections. So again, another thing that's going to change is you have to be super strategic. It's like your other challenges as well. So this is going to be fascinating to watch. Teams will have to decide when to challenge and who should challenge. According to the data from spring training last year and so far this year, catchers had the highest success rate. So if I'm a manager, I'm looking at my pitchers going, you rely on your catcher, not a word. 54.4% of the time, the catcher was correct. Hitters were next in line with exactly 50% with their success rate, and pitchers were the lowest with only 41%. So as we mentioned, the catchers have almost the exact same view as the umpire. That's always been the case. So if a catcher, even in past years, is arguing balls and strikes, there's a good reason for that, and the umpire should take notice. But catchers, proven by the data now, are the best at knowing when to challenge. Probably because, as we just mentioned, they have the best view of the pitch from behind the plate. So teams are going to have to develop strategies. Some managers, like Oakland's Mark Kotsay, they're letting players police themselves. On the Padres, San Diego, AJ Preller, they are taking a more hands-on approach and spending significant time in spring training teaching leverage situations. As for the late game drama, well, here's a scenario. Let's just, for instance, bottom of the ninth, there's a runner on third, 2 outs, and a 3-2 count. Pitcher throws a borderline pitch. That's what he's supposed to do. Umpire calls ball 4. It's a walk-off walk. The pitcher challenges. Within the 15 seconds, the graphic shows it was a strike. Call's overturned. The game continues. That's the kind of drama that's going to happen. So it's going to be must-watch TV. You're not going to want to miss it or leave early. So we've already talked a little bit about the data and how it's already showing us and shaping things, because we just literally talked about it a minute ago. So what have we learned from the data? So, this spring and last spring, they had about 60% of spring training games last year. And what we learned was there was a total number of challenges, 1,214 across 288 games. The average number of challenges per game was 4.1. You actually might have expected that number to be higher based on what you see at home. Average time per challenge was about 13.8 seconds. So you're not adding a whole ton of time to the game to have challenges. The overall success rate was 52.2. We just talked about catcher, hitter, pitchers with 54, 50, and 41. The overturn rates declined as the games went on. So in the first 3 innings, there was a 60% overturn rate. Between the 4th and the 6th inning, there was a 51%. Inning 7 and 8, there was a 43% overturn rate. And innings 7 and 8 was actually the lowest overturn rate out of all the innings at 43, and inning 9 was 46. So why? Well, players are getting more conservative with their challenges as the game progresses and they run out of challenges. There's that, and they want to make sure so that they don't run out. Fan approval. Well, MLB put out QR codes on the Jumbotrons during spring training games last year, allowing fans to scan it to give their feedback. What was the result? 72% of fans said the ABS improved their experience. You know how most surveys are only 1,000 people? I know it's spring training, but that's probably 30 or 40,000 people or more over the course of spring training. That's one of the biggest pools of survey that you could imagine, and 72% of them liked it? That is gigantic. Fans overwhelmingly loved the system. Now, player feedback is going to be much different because they're the ones actually using it. So, Major League Baseball polled team personnel and their preferences. Well, 61% preferred the challenge system, 28% wanted none at all, and about 11%, so that puts us up to 72%, wanted full automation of robotic umpires calling every pitch. The challenge system, however, won decisively. It's the Goldilocks solution where it's not too much automation, but enough that no one should really argue that much. This year in spring training so far, we started February 20th. We only have a couple of weeks of data so far, but the early reports seem to show that the system is working smoothly and that it is being used as it was meant to be. Again, they made a few tweaks that teams that enter extra innings with no challenges, they get that one challenge back per inning. If a pitch is challenged, umpires have discretion on plays that happen on the bases. Pitches, so say there was a steal and there's a strike 3 or something like that. Just an odd situation with a base runner. The umpires get to still decide what happens with those base runners, depending on the overturned upheld result. Pitches thrown by position players, that's a bit rare, but in blowouts, cannot be challenged. That's an interesting one that I had not heard before, but that is significant in a way, both for batters and for the pitchers and catchers. An ABS challenge and a replay challenge can occur on the same play. Again, strike them out, throw them out, that kind of a thing. The system already is ready for opening day. So, let's get to the future here. Where is this headed? So what does the future hold? Is this the final version of the ABS system, or will MLB eventually go to full automation? Well, the current consensus, as of now, based on the polling data, the challenge system's here to stay for the foreseeable future. The fans like it. Players prefer it over full automation. It preserves the human element of the game that really is necessary. It just corrects the big, bold mistakes. Rob Manfred, we'll get to that quote in a moment. He said, "I commend the Joint Competition Committee for striking the right balance of preserving the integral role of the umpire in the game with the ability to correct a missed call in high leverage situations, all while preserving the pace and rhythm of the game. I don't often agree with Rob Manfred, but on that statement right there, I agree with him wholeheartedly. That statement suggests that Major League Baseball is happy with the challenge system and that they're not looking to move to full automation anytime soon. Could it happen? It's not out of the realm of possibility. So the answer is maybe. They tested full automation in AAA, where the umpires received ball strike calls via an earpiece and just relayed them. Technically it worked fine, but only 11% of team personnel and 23% of fans wanted it. And that's really not enough support. So for now, challenge system it is. Major League Baseball is giving us the best of both worlds, trying to give us more accurate calls on the most important pitches, while still allowing umpires to be human and be part of the game the way they should be. From the umpire's perspective, and this is one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but the Major League Baseball Umpires Association, and they do have a union, agreed to cooperate with the ABS system as part of their contract with Major League Baseball. So what that means is, if you're going to be an umpire, you're going to be under scrutiny, and there's going to be tons of data to let you know how good of a job you're doing. So some umpires have embraced it. Others, naturally, are a little bit skeptical. But ultimately, umpires are still calling 95% of the pitches. So their role is still essential. So we're not replacing umpires. And for people with jobs and families to feed and all of that stuff, and there was still going to be umpires even if it's full automation, because you need someone to call outs and different things and control the game from home plate. So umpires never were going to stop being in the game. But I think this way, again, it strikes that perfect balance. So international implications, well, if this system is successful in Major League Baseball, you can imagine that Nippon Professional Baseball, that's the big league in Japan, the Korean Baseball Organization where Cody Ponce came out of, international tournaments like the World Baseball Classic, they could choose to use this system as well. So this could become a global standard for baseball if it works well at the major league level. All right, y'all. So we have gone real deep into what this ABS challenge system is. Now, I know they've been talking about it on all the broadcasts, but this is the one spot where we just did almost an hour specifically about this. We talked about how it could change the game and all these things that you don't get in your standard Major League Baseball inning. So if you stuck it out to the end, I appreciate you guys still being here. The 2026 MLB season, as we've always known, starts March 27th after the conclusion of the World Baseball Classic. And every game, spring training, regular season, postseason, it will all feature this new technology. It's the biggest rule change in baseball history, really. It really is. And we're all going to be learning about it together. So will it work? Based on the early data, yes it will. Will it change the game? Absolutely. Will fans like it? The early signs say yes, because some of the outrage that we used to feel as fans will be mitigated. So this is the future of baseball. And as I've mentioned already, I am excited about this. I've been waiting years for this to be implemented. So, as we do at the end of every episode, what do you guys think? Use hashtag True North Sports Talk. Jump into the comments section. Do you guys love the challenge system? Do you hate it? Would you rather a full robot umpire balls and strikes system? Let me know. Hit me up. Leave a comment. Let us know what you're thinking so far. Appreciate y'all tuning in to True North Sports Talk. Continue enjoying spring training baseball. And we will catch you on opening day.